I could patch them and put them together and make them sound like they belong to the same family, you know. And that's what music's all about.
Somewhere right now, tonight, there's a sold-out concert hall in Europe, or New York, or Tokyo, Japan. It doesn't matter which one. Pick any of them. And in that hall, there are thousands of people who paid good money, got dressed up, left their homes and their comfort and their Netflix queues to go and stand in a room and listen to one man play bass. Not a top star. He's not someone with hundreds of millions of streams and a reality TV show. He's just a bass player from Cameroon, singing in a language most of his audience has never heard. And when he starts to play, they lose their minds. You might ask, how does he do that? How does a kid who grew up with nothing, with no money, no connections, no industry, and no fancy school, how does a kid who built his first guitar out of bicycle brake cables teach himself jazz from borrowed records in a hotel, cross 2 oceans alone, and end up here? That is exactly what we are going to find out soon, because this is the story of Richard Bona. Let's go back, way back, October 28, 1967, a small town called Minta in the heart of Cameroon, Central Africa. A baby boy is born. His full name, and I love this name, is Bona Penda Nya Yuma Elolo. The world will come to know him simply as Richard Bona. Now, Minta is not a big city. There are no recording studios, no music schools, no famous venues. But here's the thing about Minta. Music is not something you go and watch. Music is something you live inside. It's in church, it's in the fields, it's in the way people grieve and celebrate and talk to God. For the people of that region, music is the first language. And Richard Bona was born right in the middle of it. His grandfather was a Groit. In West African tradition, the Groit is the keeper of stories. Before books, before anything was written down, the Groit was the one who remembered everything. Every family's history, every village legend, and every song that mattered. He held it all in his voice and in his hands and passed it down from generation to generation. The Groit wasn't just a musician, he was a living archive. That was Richard's grandfather. And his mother, she sang in the village church choir. So from the very first day Richard Bona opened his eyes, he was completely surrounded by music. By the time he was 4 years old, he had already started playing the balafon. The balafon is a traditional West African percussion instrument, which is something like a wooden xylophone with hollow girts underneath each key. And by 5, he wasn't just playing at home, he was performing at his village church in front of people and on stage. But here's the part of the story that tells you everything about who Richard Bona really is. His family didn't have money for real instrument. Most kids in his situation would hope. Richard Bona didn't wait. He picked up whatever he could find. Wood, old motorcycle parts, bicycle brake cables, and he built his own instrument. Flutes, guitars, all homemade, all held together by the sheer force of how badly he wanted to play. Think about that image for a second. A little boy in Cameroon, quietly stringing brake cables across a piece of metal, trying to make it sound like music. That's not just talent, that's hunger. And the hunger is what this whole story is built on. So when his family moved to Douala, which is Cameroon's largest city, Richard was 11. That hunger came with him. Douala was a different world. 1 million people, noise, color, and music pouring out of every corner. And for a boy like Richard, it was like walking into a bigger version of everything he had already loved. In Douala, he finally got his hands on a proper guitar and started playing in local bands, learning Cameroonian styles like Makossa and Bikutsi, getting sharper every week. His reputation as this quiet, extraordinary teenager started to spread around the city. And then one day, a French jazz club opened up at a local hotel. The owner had heard about this talented kid around town and came looking for him. He wanted Richard to put together a band and play jazz for the guests. There was just one small problem. Richard Bona had absolutely no idea what jazz was. He had never played it, barely heard about it, but he needed to make it work. So he said yes, and then figure it out. Because the club owner had a personal collection of over 500 jazz records. 500, yes. He let Richard use them freely. So Richard spent his days in the hotel listening to those records one after another, teaching himself this entire new music by ear. And every night he would go to perform what he had just learned. He basically built his own jazz university with one student and no teacher. And then one afternoon, sorting through that stack of records, he pulled one out that would change the entire direction of his life. The album was simply called Jaco Pastorius. Jaco Pastorius was the greatest electric bassist who ever lived. He played fretless bass in a way nobody had imagined before. It didn't sound like a bass. It sounded like a human voice, like a cello from another dimension. He played with a jazz fusion band called Weather Report and changed the course of music forever. He was a genius, and a tragic one. He died in 1987 at just 35 years old. But his music was very much alive, and when teenage Richard Bona dropped the needle on a track called Portrait of Tracy, a solo bass piece, just Jaco and his instrument playing harmonics that rang like bells in a cathedral, something cracked wide open inside him. One record, one song, and a boy who had been building guitars out of brake cables suddenly knew exactly who he wanted to become. He switched to bass, practiced with the same obsessive hunger he would always had, and slowly a sound started to emerge, one that carried everything he was: his grandfather's Croix tradition, the polyrhythm of Cameroonian music, the jazz harmonies from those 500 records, and on top of all of it, his voice, which was warm, deep, communicating something real, even when the words meant nothing to anyone outside of Douala. Now, the world just needed to hear it, and for that, Richard Bona needed to leave home. In 1989, at 22 years old, Richard Bona packed up his life and flew to Paris, France. Paris in the late 1980s was alive with jazz and world music. African musicians were finding real audiences there. Richard Bona enrolled at the National Conservatory of Music, finally getting formal training to go with everything he had taught himself, and started giggling around the city. He worked with French jazz musicians, African legends like Manu Dibango and Salif Keita, and steadily his name started traveling. Not through marketing, just through musicians talking to musicians the way they always have. You need to hear this guy. He plays bass but he sings too. I'm telling you, just hear him. These were all stories and murmurs that other musicians were talking about Richard Bona, and eventually those words reached someone who really mattered. Joe Zawinul. He was an Austrian-born pianist, co-founder of Weather Report, the very band that Jaco Pastorius had played in. The man who had stood beside Richard's idol and made music history. He heard about Richard Bona and they met in Paris. Now, sit with the poetry of this for a second. Jaco Pastorius, the man whose record Richard found in a hotel in Douala and whose music completely redirected his life, had been the bassist for Weather Report, Joe Zawinul's band, and now here was Zawinul standing in front of Richard Bona, about to invite him to fill that same role. In 1995, Richard Bona moved to New York. He joined Zawinul's new group, the Zawinul Syndicate, and toured the world. In 1997, he became the musical director for Harry Belafonte, one of the greatest entertainers of the 20th century, leading his band across Europe and in North America. Still in his 20s, already standing next to legends. But here's the detail I love most about his story in New York. On Tuesday nights, when the big gigs were done, Richard will slip into a small downtown club called the Easy Bar and do something quietly beautiful. He will run tribute nights for Jaco. Every week he would mix Jaco's classic songs, Library City, the very song that cracked him open as a teenager in Douala, with his own original music. Just him, the bass, and whoever showed up. A kid from Cameroon in a tiny Manhattan club playing love letters to the man from Florida whose record he found in a hotel 20 years before. Music really is wild. Word kept spreading. Musicians started showing up at the Easy Bar just to watch. Then producers, then record executives. Everyone asking the same question. Who is this guy? And when does he get his own album? The answer came in 1999. Richard Bona released his debut solo album titled Scenes from My Life on Columbia Records. He was 31 years old, and every single one of those years was packed into that record. It was jazz, but it was African. It was pop, but the harmonies could stop you mid-breath. He sang entirely in Douala, his language from back home, and audiences across Europe and America and Japan who didn't understand a single word were standing in concert halls with tears on their faces. The Los Angeles Times reviewed it and wrote something that became one of the most quoted lines in music journalism. I quote, "Imagine an artist with Jaco Pastorius' virtuosity, Georges Benson's vocal fluidity, Joao Gilberto's sense of song and harmony, all mixed up with African culture. Ladies and gentlemen, we bring you Richard Bona." End of quote. More albums followed. Reverence in 2001, Munia, The Tale in 2003, then Tiki in 2005, which featured a young John Legend and earned Richard a Grammy nomination. And the music kept reaching further, connecting more people, pulling more of the world into his own orbit. But the biggest moment came in 2002, when guitar legend Pat Metheny, 12 Grammy wins, one of the most respected names in jazz, was rebuilding his band and came calling. He wanted Richard for everything: bass, vocals, guitar, percussion. The album they made together was called Speaking of Now, and in 2003, it won the Grammy Award for Best Contemporary Jazz Album. I want to stop here for a moment because it's easy to hear Grammy Award and nod and move on. But think about it. The full distance of this journey. A little boy from Minta in Cameroon, building guitars from break cables, crossing the ocean twice, playing Tuesday night tributes in a tiny club, and then standing in a room, one of the most famous rooms in music business, holding a Grammy. That's not career. That's a miracle made out of work. And it didn't stop there. A Grammy nomination for Tiki in 2007, France's highest music honor, the Victoire de la Musique, the Antonio Carlos Jobim Award at the Montreal Jazz Festival in 2009, named after legendary Brazilian composer of The Girl from Ipanema, given to artists who bridge worlds through music. Richard Bona had bridged more worlds than most people knew existed. Our words tell you someone is great, but they can't make you feel it. So let me try. When Richard Bona plays bass, he doesn't just play the note. He sings it, he bends it, he breathes into it. He plays fretless bass, no metal dividers between the notes. So the sound slides into each other the way a voice does when someone is speaking from the heart. And on top of all of that, he's actually singing in Douala, a language most of his audience will never speak, and they don't need to, because the feeling comes through anyway. African polyrhythms, jazz harmony, Cuban groove, Brazilian warmth, a pop singer-songwriter's gift for melodies that stay with you for days. All of it in one human being, one stage, every single night. He has taught jazz improvisations at New York University. He mentors young musicians all over the world. He still performs, still records, still carries his grandfather's tradition into every room he enters. The Groit, still walking, still telling stories, and still holding the memories of his people in his hands, just now for the whole world. And that really is the whole story. His grandfather kept his community's stories alive in his voice. Richard Bona keeps the stories of the entire world alive in his music. The lineage didn't break, it just got bigger. Richard Bona's story is not about luck. It's not about being discovered at the right moment. It's about a boy who was handed nothing and built everything, starting with a guitar made of brake cables in a small town most of the world have never heard of, and ending up on a stage in every corner of the planet. Every concert, every ceremony, every album, an archive, every note, a message arriving from somewhere deep and ancient, saying, and I quote, "We are here, we have always been here, and we are extraordinary." If you've never listened to Richard Bona, start tonight, because there's just a lot. Put on scenes from my life, then Tiki, sit somewhere quiet and just let it happen. Then come back and tell me if I was wrong. I'll wait. If you enjoy content like this, please don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching. See you on the next video.